remember how long, guess I always been this way, running 90 miles a minute all night and day, doing things that'd kill a lesser man or get him locked up tight. Never meant to hurt nobody, no I ain't like that, just trying to make my way any way I can. There's a lot of folks out there wanna slow me down, make me act right.
My name's Jasper Graham. I drive Boost Springsteen. I'm from Eaton Rapids, Michigan, and we got started with Boost Springsteen about 2 years ago. We debuted it, had tons of problems at first for the first part of the year. The car originally was bought 4 years ago, and kind of a crazy deal how we got that. We had a supercharged hatchback, and it was like 1120s, and we were thinking it was kind of fast, which it was not. And we were gonna pull all the motor out of that because it was rusted out. So I found this chassis. The guy had like one picture of it, wouldn't give us any details on the car at all. So I ended up driving like 3 hours, fingers crossed that it was gonna be cool. It ended up being really sweet. We got a 19,000 mile Cobra for $2,000. And it already had a rear end in it, and K-member, and tubular A-arms, and a couple other parts like a hood and some stuff. Took us about 2 years to build it. I was super busy. And once we finally got it built, we debuted it at Pour Your Own Puddle probably like 2 years ago. We had a fast system in it and had all sorts of problems. We actually pitted next to Garrett Chastain, who works for Fuel Tech, and we ended up buying a Fuel Tech the next week because we couldn't get it to run. It was dropping cylinders. Coils caught on fire because the dwell was set wrong. Just a lot of things we didn't understand at the time, and the fast was a little more complicated to understand for a beginner, and the Fuel Tech was a lot easier. So if I'm looking back, I probably could have made the fast work, but we scrapped it and went with Fuel Tech, and I'm glad we did. From there, that first year was rough. We showed up to the first event. We didn't really know what we were doing. We showed up with no weight in the trunk. We had 2-inch drop spindles. We had no separation or no squat, no lift in the front. Walked through the pits and saw Black Jesus, which was owned by Corey Malone at the time. Him and Bobby Burton were standing there. As I was looking in his hatch, I saw he had about 300 pounds of weight in there, and knew right off the bat, like, we're in a lot of trouble. Watched everything go. Those guys helped me out a lot right off the bat. We ended up being teammates now with like Joe Ferry, Stephen Camel, Corey Malone, Bobby Burton. There's a bunch of other ones, JP, Steve Atkinson. So they were really helpful at first, and that was awesome because not a lot of people want to talk in this. I'll tell anyone anything, as you know, Josh, that I don't really hide secrets. I'd rather all of us get faster and be more competitive, but at the time no one was really talking, and they were, so that was really cool because it got us quite a bit ahead. So by the end of the year, I would say in the first year, the only cool things we actually did is we guessed the light and beat Dirty 30 in a grudge race, which if we wouldn't have guessed the light, probably wouldn't have went that way. And then had 2 close races with Beater Bomb, which, you know, kind of let me know that we were somewhere in the ballpark of being where we wanted to be, because at the time Beater Bomb was the fastest thing around. After that, we stripped everything. We were running a 4.6 mod motor with twin 67s, and we were just super limited on what we could do. It took quite a while to spool, which wasn't fun at the line, so we decided that we'd switch to LS, which I know is what everyone does and isn't really that cool. But we switched to LS because when we travel to these places that are 12, 14 hours away, sometimes 20 hours away, I hate to get there, break something simple, and not be able to get a part. Where everyone in the pits has something for an LS, no one has anything for a 4-valve Cobra motor. So we switched to LS. We had a lot more luck coming out the next year. A little while into it, we switched to a Hughes transmission and converter and dump valve system. Pete Nichols, in my opinion, is the best person I've ever dealt with almost. He'll do anything for you. He has tons of knowledge. And the dump valve system, when we were running it this last year, was pretty pretty uncommon in no prep. There wasn't a ton of people using it. So we wanted to start right off using it to try to get ahead, and it helped a ton. It allowed us to run a much tighter converter that we could loosen up with the dump valves and then close the dump valves towards the end and be able to mile an hour out the back door. So the Hughes transmission was just an unbelievable step forward. And then the afterworks suspension, where we switched to a ridiculous amount of travel up front, a spring that most people would probably laugh at if I told them what we ran. And if you want to DM me, I'll tell you, but I don't want to share anyone's secrets or anything on how they build them. But that really made all the difference in the world. At that point right there, we started competing with more people. We went to Oklahoma and did pretty well. We went to Kentucky and did pretty well. We went to Tennessee and did pretty well. It was when everything started clicking. The car would 60 foot a lot better on the street. We had a couple like 130s on some pretty bad surfaces, like a chip seal, like when we were street racing in Indiana after the banger with Jeff Thomas and them. And that's a fair rundown of the car, other than at the end of the year we were running E98 with no intercooler, and to keep up, because everyone progressively got faster through the year, we then had to turn the car up, and there was just a little too much cylinder pressure, too much heat, and we were burning head gaskets all the time. So we switched to meth. I recommend meth for everyone. I love meth. Don't ever run anything other than meth. All other fuels are for peasants. It's just meth. Run meth. Other than that, that's probably a catch-up for this next year. We finally went and built a dart block and some Frankenstein heads. We're gonna get a bullseye turbo off a Viet. I might totally be butchering your name. If I am so sorry. I'm horrible at pronouncing names sometimes. We're gonna run a bullseye this year, a 98, and see if we can make a little more power for some of the front end of the track stuff. But 90% of what we want to do is horrible surfaces and back of the track. So other than that, that's about it for Boost Springsteen. Any upgrades or the story of how it kind of came about. We got into racing when I was really young. My dad used to drag race motorcycles. So when I was like 5 years old, we spent all summer at the track till I was probably 10. He raced those, and that's really where I got into it. When I was 15, I saved a bunch of money from mowing lawns and shoveling driveways, which I'm sure some of you young kids will have no clue what I'm even talking about. It's what we used to do for money before OnlyFans and GoFundMes and YouTube videos paid you. We actually had to go do like physical labor to get money. So my parents agreed to match whatever I made and get my first car. And my first car was a 1967 Cougar with a 289 hypo. It was a super clean car. I loved that thing. To this day, I actually want to build like a chassis 67 Cougar. I just don't have the money or the time to find one right now, but that'll probably be the next build, will be a 67 Cougar. Wasn't too long after that, I was a kid in high school, so the 67 Cougar was super inconvenient when you're cruising with your girls and stuff, and you got to jump out here and spray starting fluid in it to get it to start, because it's got some old Holly 2-barrel on it that was junk. And so my dad offered to trade me for a 1987 Turbo Coupe, which had a milled head, a bigger turbo. It was a pretty cool car. It had like electric suspension and moonroof. So it was a lot cooler in high school, so I switched to that. About 18, I bought my first like drag car. Down the road from my house, a guy put a 1986 4i hatchback with a 351 in it for sale. I saved a bunch of money. I sold the Thunderbird and bought the Mustang. We drag raced that for a little bit, and then I wanted to go faster. So when I was at the track one day, I found a car there for sale, and it was Sean Johnson who owned it. Some of you might remember Sean Johnson. If you're older, he was the factory stock champion in an MRA for like 6 straight years. 2 with that car, or not, that car actually was an open comp that he won 2 championships with, and then built a new Edge with a 4-valve for factory stock, which he ended up winning a bunch of championships in. We ran that for a while, and I guess this story is kind of crazy. So I was a kid at the time. Right out of high school, I worked at a factory that my dad's buddy was the boss of, so I moved up really quick. If I can tell any of the young people anything, it's who you know. Don't ever be bugged anyone. Don't ever treat anyone like shit, because the only way you get anywhere in this life is who you know. Not what you can do, not how good you are at it. It's who you know and how much they like you. So through all that, we ended up getting the car repoed because I lost my job when they moved the plant to North Carolina, and I actually had the car on a loan. So I quit paying the loan and hid the car. And eventually I could see the repo guys were showing up at my friend's house and my family's house trying to find this car. So one day I went out to my buddy's house. We stripped every single thing out of the car. We put it completely to a shell. No windows, no K-member, no rear end. We took our backhoe and loaded it on a trailer, and I drove to where the repo people were, and when I took it to them, they offered me a job. And I told them, I'll work for you if you'll buy my car back for me. So they ended up buying the car back for me, and we put it all back together with the parts I had laying on the floor. So in the end, I snuck out of the loan and ended up with the car still. So I recommend that for no one, but it worked out for us. After that, I got rid of the car, and I actually ended up getting rid of all my cars and got back into BMX bikes. So we traveled all over the country, riding for Blackout Distribution, Kink bicycles, DK, and like a whole crew of us rode all over the country to Posh and PA and all the trails and a bunch of different parks, and did that for like 6 years. And then that's when I bought that hatchback, got back into cars, and we're current to where we are now. My family is absolutely awesome. For them to put up with how much we travel, go around, not home, in the pole barn all night, working on stuff. She almost has to come out there to get me at 4 a.m. when it's race season if we're trying to fix something. I'm super anal about checking bolts. So like I constantly, probably 3 times a week, try to go over the bolts on the car, on the control arms and stuff. I don't really know why. I've never had anything happen, but we always try to check the bolts. So she has to drag me out of the barn all the time. They travel with us to the close ones, like War in the Woods, Marion, PYOP at Milan, Lapeer sometimes when we do that. So I have a lot more fun with the family. They have a lot of fun there. The kids ride the golf cart and goof off, and we grill out food. So I definitely like having the family there, and they're super awesome for putting up with all of it, because there's a lot to it. Probably my most memorable street moment so far would have probably been Ohio. That place is just something different. It's a farm that you pull up to like a track, and there's trailers all parked in the yard, and there's corn as far as you can see, and it's almost like being at the track, but you're on the street. And it was one of the first events we went to where we got to hang with the Mac crew, Jeff Thomas, Sparkman, Mason, Sean Fesner, Adam Hudson, Nick Taylor, Dylan Hadley, which has been one of the coolest people I've met. Eric Mans was there, which we've known for quite a while. And it was just a really good time. It's where we met you. It's just a different atmosphere and was a lot of fun. The road's really tight. I'll remember thinking when I pulled up with Tony McKinney for first round, I looked over and thought, shit, if this fiberglass door had a mirror on it, there's probably 2 inches between us. And it's super exciting. Really cool place. We met CJ Buckner there, kind of, watching him spin through one side of the corn to the other. Just a really good time. Probably the coolest track event we went to was War in the Woods by far. Jeff Thomas and John Molina put on just an absolutely amazing event. If you haven't went, you need to go. if you're not locked into the second one, because I think the first one's full, you need to be. Just an absolute riot. All the local guys I mentioned there, a lot of good people, good times. We went to Hartshorn, Oklahoma too, for Clash on the Concrete. That was a really cool atmosphere too. That trip ended kind of not great with Jeff rolling the car and everything, but the way he handled it and stuff made it still a really awesome time. Good group of guys down there, Rolly Dale, Jason Rank, Kendall was there, Justin Pierce, all them. It was a really good time. But War in the Woods was definitely probably my favorite event for the track stuff of last year. So I'd like to thank Steve Atkinson, whose shop we're using today. He builds my motors. Just an amazing guy, does absolutely flawless work. Huge reason why we're where we are. Johnny Quick and Jake Blaine. I message them all the time in the middle of the night. They always answer back, have helped me set up the car, which was another huge reason why we were as fast as we were this year. Pete Nichols at Hughes, I can't stress enough, every single person on the planet should be running one. The more of you that don't, I'm actually not even mad because we're just going to beat you. Afterworks suspension, Ron is amazing, super backed up because of how amazing his stuff is, but I promise it's worth it. Riverside Gear, which would be Bob Cassidy and Scott Cassidy, they set up all my rear ends and do anything I need rear end wise. Marty Marriott on my rear end housing and my Marty boxes, just absolute flawless work. Amsoil and Dave Boone. I know I said we switched to meth. We were running E98 ethanol 1. Jim Johnson is who was giving us that. That is some of the best fuel I've ever used. If I ever put an intercooler back on the car, I will run that fuel every time. They helped us out a lot. And most of my crew, Chris Hopkins, Phil West, Maynard Backoffen, Tony Pito, Billy Steele, Sean Norton, Fred Cole, have all, Jack, Wildman Jack, Matt Stain, just, I've had so much help on this car, and I swear to you all, it takes a village. If you're doing this by yourself, it is 50 times harder. Johnny and Jake, which was really important, helped my crew on the burnout procedure because before this year we were not doing it right and had no clue that we weren't. That was a huge help. Your crew is as important as you are. They line you up sideways, they put you out of the groove, and you might as well call the race. So definitely love those guys. They spend all night working, blowing up barrels at the track with us. Just random good times. I have to thank my family, my mom, my dad, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, wife, kids, just everyone that helps and allows me to do this because I have so much fun.
Yeah, remember how long? Guess I always been this way, running 90 miles a minute all night and day, doing things that'd kill a lesser man or get him locked up tight. Never meant to hurt nobody, no I ain't like that, just trying to make my way any way I can. There's a lot of folks out there wanna slow me down, make me act right.